Alright, this is going to be a video lesson for 6th and 7th grade, and it's going to cover part 2 of the character design unit we are doing. The last video, we focused on drawing our character in a standing pose, and in this video, we're going to be looking at doing two portraits, one facing straight on, and one that is either in a profile or 3/4 view. If you are still working on the standing pose of your character, you can pause this video and come back to it whenever you're ready. I'm going to be posting this video on a Wednesday for people who are done with part 1 and want to move on to part 2. But there's going to be a lot of people who are still working on this part, probably even into next week, and that's fine. So you can come back to the video whenever you're ready to move on to step 2. Alright, just as in part 1, in part 2, the drawing we end up doing is going to be really different depending on what style we have chosen to draw our character. In this example, I've chosen to draw it in sort of an anime or manga style. In the example that I produced for the first video, I chose to do kind of a classic comic book style, and both of these characters, or both of these styles of characters, have really different proportions. This one is 8.5 heads tall. This one is only 6 heads tall. So your character is probably not going to look the same as mine. The principles are the same, but your exact measurements are going to be different. Alright, so here's just a simplified diagram of what we're going to end up with. If you're watching this video and following along, it means you finished the standing pose. So on one side of the paper you have your character kind of standing straight up and tall, and then on the other side we're going to have two portraits. We split this part into a top and a bottom, so the top half is going to be for our portrait that's just facing straight on, and our bottom half is going to be for our portrait that's in profile or 3/4. So profile is turned all the way to one side, and 3/4 is sort of in between straight on and profile. Alright, so I'm working on a slightly larger paper, so I'll have more room and you'll be able to see the details of my drawings a little bit more easily. The first thing I need to do, though, is go look at my reference and determine what kind of shape my character's head is. It's really easy to just draw a generic oval, but you should look and think about the true shape of your character's head. Is it taller than it is wider? Is it very round? Does it have almost corners on part of it? Is it pointier at the bottom? Look really closely, because most styles have a really distinctive way of drawing the head, and you're going to want to get as close to that as you can. Alright, if you don't remember from part 1, I was looking at a picture of Batman when I drew this character, so I drew my character in the style of, comic book Batman. When I look at that reference that I used, the kind of shape that I'm seeing is not a perfect oval. It's kind of more squared off at the top. And it's definitely taller than it is wide. So I'm going to pay really close attention to that shape as I draw and try to replicate it. Okay, once you've gotten the shape of your head, which again is probably going to be different than mine depending on what style you're using, so it might be really round, it might even be more vertically stretched than mine, but what you need to do now is find where the eyes should be. So on a regular human's head, the eyes are always going to fall halfway down. If you were to take a ruler and measure someone, what you would find is that this space from the top of their head to their eyes is the same as the space from their eyes to the bottom of their chin. But you can probably guess that a lot of styles break that rule. So some can place the eyes up higher or lower depending on the effect that artist wants. So I'm going to take a look at my character and try to figure out where that eye line goes, and this is a really important measurement to get right. Alright, so I think in my example, or the picture that I'm looking at, it's just a little bit below center. The reason why I spent a little bit of time trying to get this in the right place is because this is kind of like our head measurement for our standing pose. So when we draw our character standing up, we use the head as kind of a unit of measurement to determine where everything goes. And in the portrait, you're going to use the position of the eyes to determine where everything goes. So getting this in the right place is really, really critical. I'm going to go ahead and try to do the same thing with where I think the nose should fall. So when you're placing the eyes, you're looking at how far up and down they are in relation to this oval or whatever shape you ended up with for the head. When you're placing the nose, where the nose should go, you're looking at it in relationship to the eyes. Is it really close to the eyes? Is it far away from the eyes? Spend some time studying your reference to see if you can get this in as accurate a position as possible, because it'll make your later steps a little bit easier. So I did the same thing one more time for the mouth, just picking out a line where I think the mouth that represents where the mouth should go. So if this is like sort of the features arranged vertically, right, like how far down they are, the next step is to determine how wide they should all be. So how wide are the eyes? In some cases, in some styles, the eyes are huge, right? They're really wide. They take up almost the majority of the head. In some, they're really small. How wide is the nose? Is the nose just this little tiny mark that's barely visible, or is it taking up more space in the head? So take a look at your reference, figure out the widths of everything, and then mark those with just really simple marks. So at this step of the drawing, what I'm really doing is cleaning up some of the details that I've added and darkening some of my lines. I would probably want to fix a couple things before I finish up this drawing, but since I'm at the last steps, I thought I'd stop and talk to you about some of the problems I ran into while I was doing this drawing and how I solved them. The first problem was my reference was Batman, right? So I was trying to draw my character in the style of Batman, and Batman wears a mask, so I couldn't see his eyebrows or his ears, and that was causing a problem. I had to go and find another character from the same comic book and use that as my reference. So you might run into that problem. You might be trying to draw something on your character that's not part of your reference. If that happens, get on Google Images, search up, a secondary character or a supporting character that has the feature you're trying to draw. The second thing that I ran into was I kept having issues with symmetry, and it's pretty likely that you'll run into the same problem. So the hardest part of doing this straight on view is symmetry, and it can get pretty frustrating. So if you're kind of like running low on patience, like you can't get the left and the right side to match up, and you've erased it 100 times, go ahead and take a break, or even maybe move on to the profile view. Because the good thing about doing profile or 3/4 is it doesn't have to be symmetrical at all. So, believe it or not, like the face is one of the few things we draw that has perfect symmetry. Most of the things we draw are not like a mirror image on either side. It's not something we get a whole lot of practice doing, and it can be kind of difficult and kind of frustrating and challenging. So if you need to take breaks or you need to put the drawing away, you can do that. Come back to it. This might not take as long as the actual figure because it's a little bit less complex. But then again, you might have to go and make more changes than you did with the figure. The way the body can sort of position itself, it's not usually in a perfectly symmetrical pose, but this drawing that you're doing right now is, and that might mean a lot of fine-tuning and erasing, and that can get really fatiguing and make you annoyed really quickly. So do it in little steps. When you step away from a drawing and come back to it, you're going to see things you didn't see before. Certain things that were giving you serious problems might actually end up being really easy to solve 24 hours later. So if you need to take a break, take a break. When you get to this stage, you're pretty satisfied with the symmetry, you're pretty satisfied with the level of detail that you've put into your character, you're going to want to go ahead to the bottom of the page and put in your profile. And that will be a separate video. I think I will have to do, some of you have already talked to me about wanting to do 3/4, and some of you have talked to me about doing profile. They're related, but they're not the same. So I think I'm going to try and do both at the same time in the same video. But for this video, to make it fit on YouTube, I'm going to stop at this point. I'm going to let you guys go ahead and do this little step, and I will post at the end of the week or the beginning of next week this last part of our character design sheet.